watching A Walk in the Garden. I'm Liz Davey, and this show is filmed in episodes throughout the gardening year in my garden here in Norfolk. It's now September. We're getting into fall, but the weather is not acting too much like fall today. It's been very warm, and it continues to be dry. In fact, we're officially, I believe, the warmest summer on record at this point, and the driest. So things in the garden are a little bit crispy since we haven't been able to water a whole lot this summer, and Mother Nature hasn't done a very good job of it. However, we still have things to harvest, and there are a number of herbs that really like hot, humid weather. And thyme is one of them. I have a lot of thyme plants, and I can continue to harvest and use that. Sage is a little smaller than usual, but it's still harvestable, not quite as hardy. And we have our rosemary, and I'm getting ready for fall at this point. Fall is coming. You can probably see a few leaves falling. They're a little premature this year, I think, because of the dry season. Many of them have started to fall already, in spite of the warmth. We could have a frost anytime from between now, mid-September, through mid to late October. And you never really know when it's coming unless you watch the weather, and even they are not completely sure. So we want to start getting ready now to bring in any tender plants that you want to keep over the winter inside. And what I'm going to do is dig up my rosemary plant that I put in the spring and put it in a pot to come in for the winter. And we have some pretty good roots on it. And I'm just going to put it into a pot on top of some compost. And then on top of it, I will add soil. Remove the leaf here, smooth it around. And then I'm going to set it right back where it was for now and water it well and keep it here for probably a few more weeks. Give it a chance to settle in the same position where it was with some water, and then it'll be ready to gradually move inside. First I'll move it nearer to the back door and keep watering it well until I'm sure that it's settled in the pot, and then I can bring it inside for the winter. The other thing I can start to do is that any of the plants that are completely brown and no longer blooming can be cut back for winter. Some things will get cut back and some won't in the herb garden. We will not cut back thyme or southernwood. That one will get cut back in the spring. But I can cut back tarragon and oregano, and I can cut the blossoms off of the lavender plant. But I'll leave the plant itself so that we can do any trimming of that in the spring as well. The lemon balm and lime balm, again, once they turn brown, they'll be cut back to the ground. The rose bushes I don't prune in the fall. I'll wait again and prune those in the spring. You can see that this one's already setting some nice orange rose hips, and they'll be a little decorative out here as the leaves fall off the plant. And hopefully the birds will enjoy them as well. Chives, again, they will automatically brown themselves and just kind of disappear into the ground. Sage is not pruned at all, and again, that will be usable probably right through Thanksgiving. Now let's move over to the perennial garden. Of course, any of the things that you want to save inside can either be dug, or you can take cuttings and make new little plants to save over the winter. We're coming into a fall blooming season, which would be a lot nicer if we had had sufficient rain. As it is, I've put in a few chrysanthemums, and I have to make sure that I'm out here watering them. They really need to be watered. Anything that you've put in new this year, make sure that you keep watered all fall, especially if you want it to last through the winter. Now the mums that they call hardy mums are not necessarily hardy because we're putting them in usually late in the year, and that doesn't give them enough time to put down roots. We have some other things that are hardy. that are perennial, and that would be the Boltonia, which looks like a white aster, but it's really another type of plant called Boltonia. Very attractive to pollinators, and a nice spot of white in the garden at this season. Eupatorium chocolate is this one, and it will have white blooms. They're in bud right now. It's provided a nice dark foliage throughout the summer, which has been a background to some of the flowering plants. Again, I have a container garden, and that too needs to be watered to keep it going. This will be discarded once frost hits. I won't bother to take that inside for the winter. Daylilies. If you wish to divide daylilies, you can do that anytime now. However, with the weather that we're having, I suspect I will wait until spring and see if we have a little rainier spring. Otherwise, I will have just more plants to water, and I don't need that right now. This is the Joe Pye weed, and again, I put that in this fall, so I have to really be sure to keep it watered. If you put in any trees this year or shrubs, again, make sure they're well soaked frequently so that they can go into the winter hydrated, and that will help with their hardiness throughout the winter season. Coming up this way, I have a few roses, the last roses of summer, and I will probably not deadhead these. I will again let it form hips and tell it that it's time to get ready for cooler weather. This will continue to bloom until frost, and especially if we get more rain. The annuals that I planted earlier to take the place of some of the bulbs have come up, these annual plants, and then there's a little chrysanthemum that's here from the one I divided in the spring. Black-eyed Susans, I've let go to seed. The chickadees really love the seeds on those, so I've left them for the chickadees. All of the sedums are now in bloom, and they're often covered with bees. Today we have a lot of honeybees and a few bumblebees. Again, another wonderful plant for pollinators. We really need to encourage pollinators by planting things that they like. The bees really don't bother you. They're there for pollinating and for getting the pollen for themselves. And if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. So don't be afraid of planting plants that attract bees. Several of the sedums have come through pretty well this year. Another plant that doesn't seem to mind the dry weather as much. And that's always good to have a few of those in the garden. Coming over here, I have some of the fall asters that are starting to bloom, and they're attracting a few butterflies, as is this taller plant, the Verbena bonariensis, which is a tall verbena, and this one is a perennial. It will also drop seed and come up for next year. And it too attracts a lot of butterflies. They really like it. Up this way I have a few zinnias that I've mixed in with the other plants. Again, annuals that will come out at the end of the season. I have lemon verbena in the garden and lemongrass, and those will be dug just as I dug the rosemary over in the herb garden. They are herbs, and I do winter them over and hopefully get another season out of them. You could also take cuttings of the lemon verbena if you wanted to increase the number of plants you have, and try to keep it over. It is one that I've had difficulty with the cuttings growing, but I always give it a try anyway. The lemongrass will grow for me for about 2 years, and then it gets just too big to carry in and out, and I start over again with a young plant. We still have plenty of color to be had in the garden. The grasses are going to be lovely. I've been cutting back things as they finish blooming and turn brown. I had some artemisia right here, and again I cut that back last week, and now I'm getting a few more little blooms on it. A number of these perennials that did not bloom well due to the drought, every time it rains even a little bit, they try to put out a few more blossoms. I think they would really like to have bloomed, but again, without the water, they just don't have the resources they need to be fully blooming in this season. Again, any lavenders that you have, do not cut back in the fall. We cut those back in the spring. I'll protect them over the winter, and then they'll be ready to go in the spring, and that would be the time to cut them back if they need it, or to prune them down a little bit. We have a lot of butterflies in here today, which is lovely. Nice black swallowtail flitting around, and also have seen monarchs and fritillaries and a number of other butterflies. They really seem to be enjoying the garden at this season. We still have a few platycodon thanks to cutting it back, and some of the chrysanthemums that I divided in the spring are starting to bud and bloom. Again, more asters up this way. In another week or two, they will be in full bloom. This is the pepper that I kept over the winter last year, and I'm going to mention it because I'll be using it today in my cooking. It's a hot lemon pepper, and the peppers themselves turn a yellow color when they're fully ripe. We've been using them green. It is a hot pepper, so it's kind of nice to have it. Tastes a bit like a jalapeno, so I've been using it instead of jalapeno in recipes. Now let's move on to the vegetable garden. Down in the vegetable garden now, and the things that we planted a month or so ago have come up. I have some baby kale here that will probably go through the winter and be ready for harvest next spring. I also have some spinach, which I can pick anytime as baby spinach, and that too will last through a frost. Some of the things in here will, and others will not. Others will wilt. I also have a few radishes and a little bit of the bitter greens lettuce, and some arugula, and also another batch of arugula over on the other side. This is a Mexican sunflower, and there are 2 or 3 of them, and you can see it's a butterfly magnet right now. Bees and butterflies absolutely love it. It's well worth planting, and that was planted from seed in the end of May, and it's a huge plant. You could even make a hedge of them if you wished and have butterflies all season. But the butterflies flock to it, and I really enjoy having them in the garden, so it's a plant that I really enjoy. I have perpetual spinach that I can pick anytime. We won't consume the midrib, but it makes great cream spinach or even spinach salad. Parsnips, I'll wait to dig until after it frosts because they'll become sweeter. I'm still getting a few green and yellow beans, enough for a meal about once a week. We have beets to pick, also broccoli and the parasacaba, which is a broccoli relative, which forms smaller heads. We've been picking enough of that for a couple meals a week. And the lima beans. Lima beans did really well this year. I'm not sure what it is about them, but I've picked them several times and it looks like they need it again. With the lima beans, you need to open the pod, and you'll find the beans inside the pods. So it does take a little more work than green beans or the wax beans, but there's something my husband particularly enjoys, so I decided to grow half a row of lima beans, and we've been picking them and enjoying them for the last couple weeks, and it looks like the harvest will continue probably until frost. Still getting a few tomatoes. The cucumbers have pretty much dried up and are gone. I have a few eggplant that are starting. They're slow because of, again, the dry weather. But the cucumber has pretty much had it. There are still a couple small ones hanging on, but I will be removing this fairly soon and introducing it to the compost area because I don't think we're going to be getting much more. Again, I'm picking a few tomatoes. I have a yellow plum, a cherry, several of the red plums, and some larger round tomatoes, red tomatoes. Still getting a few zucchini and a few summer squash. The harvest has slowed down on those, but we're still getting them. The kale is still plentiful from the spring planting, and I also have celery plants. Because of the lack of water, they haven't done quite as well as they would have done had we had more rain, but it's still usable and nice cut up in salads. As the garden surrenders to frost, I'll be pulling up the plants, and then we'll add crushed fallen leaves to the garden to be tilled in to add kind of a self-composting situation to the garden. I'll also add compost from my compost pile and till that in along with the straw that has been put down between the rows. And this gives it some organic matter that will decompose over the winter and provide some next year's nutrition for the vegetables that I'll put here then. Remember, I did do a plan of this garden, and next year when I do my plan, I will need to reverse it so that I don't plant the same crop in the same place 2 years in a row. It gets a little tricky, but if you can rotate your crops, you tend to have a little better luck with them as far as insects go. If you plant them in the same spot, you're liable to get the same problems that you had the year before, and perhaps even worse problems. I have a dahlia that's blooming a little bit, and it's over here along the wall, the fence, and we're getting a couple blooms from that. This is one that, again, I kept over last winter. I put it in a cool bedroom. I dug it up. We'll be digging it up later, and again, bringing it inside, and it will continue to bloom until frost. The gourd vine that I planted has kind of taken over this corner of the garden. It has not been tremendously productive, but I do have one large bottle gourd. And I will be leaving this here to mature and dry, and hopefully it will be good and dry by the time frost comes, and then I can move it into my shed to dry a little further. Back in this corner, I do have some beans that I raised for dry beans. These are beans that can be cooked and made into chili and other dishes like that. Most of these plants will be cut down. I do have amaryllis that I summered over out here. Hopefully the bulbs were able to gain some strength from the sun. And I'll be digging those soon, putting them in my garden shed and letting them dry out completely. I can replant those probably around November or December, and expect flowering shoots to arise in maybe February or March. Some people like to have the amaryllis bloom at Christmas. I usually have many other things around, excuse me, so I just as soon have the amaryllis for January and February when things are not blooming in the house and the decorations have all been taken down. Now let me go over to the potting bench. Still getting ready for cooler weather, and it's nice to do it before it is cool and have things ready to go inside. That way when you see the weather forecast and they're forecasting a frost for your area, you can be ready to bring plants in if they're still outside. Also, in the vegetable garden, if you have a frost warning, you want to get out there and pick your tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, anything that's really sensitive to frost, any basil that happens to be left, and bring it inside because it will not survive a frost. Things like kale, broccoli, some of the greens, the other bitter greens and other salad greens will survive a light frost, but some of the plants will not. So you either have to cover them or pick them when you see that frost warning. The last few years we have been getting frost later in the season than when I first moved here over 40 years ago. It seemed like over 40 years ago we got a frost shortly after Labor Day, but now we can extend the season at least a month and sometimes two before we have that frost, which is really nice because it makes the garden bloom a little bit longer. Anyway, I'm still getting ready for frost. Several shows ago we did some cuttings, and we have some nice roots on some of these cuttings. This is a hydrangea cutting, and it has some good roots. So what I'm going to do is plant it in another pot of its own with a lot more root space. And instead of bringing this inside for the winter, I will find a spot in the garden where I can bury this pot and then cover the plant with some straw and hope it makes it through the winter. Again, we need to keep it well watered before I do that. I'm still doing cuttings as well. And these are some of the peppermint geraniums from the herb garden. And I'll be just popping them in, putting a little rooting hormone on the end, and popping them into the flower pots. Some of our other cuttings have taken hold over in the corner, and these will come inside. So again, I will be watching the weather, and they will probably not make it through frost. They're pretty tender. And the other one I want to do is one of these succulents. It's a Tradescantia purple dragon, I think. And again, just pop it in. And these things root pretty readily. I'll watch them, and if they don't root, I'll just pot up a few more. These things will need to get watered, and I'll need to keep watering them if it doesn't rain. It's also time to be thinking about your house plants. If you have plants like this begonia inside, this one is in a small pot, and it needs to be in a larger pot in order to survive and bloom nicely. So I have prepared a pot here, and I've put some potting soil in the bottom of the pot, and I'm just going to put some compost and potting soil around the plant and give that a drink too. This one needed a bigger pot, and it's best not to go up too large a pot. 1 inch larger is probably a good rule of thumb. You don't want to put this in a pot this big. Otherwise it won't grow as well. And again, remembering to water it in. This one will go back inside because it was inside. And I'll sit it on a saucer and keep it in the part sun. Other plants need more care, which I'm not going to do, but I'll show you. This one is a streptocarpus that was inside. Again, a house plant that blooms pretty well all winter with these lovely red blooms. And it is getting crowded, and you can see if you look in here, there are several plants. So I can divide this and have more plants. So that's what I'll do. I'll tip it out of the pot and divide it into individual plants and repot those into separate pots. This is a French lavender plant, and you can see there's a lot of growth in the middle, but it's gotten really straggly around the edges. This too is tender. It's not a hardy lavender. But what I plan to do with this one is to cut it off, cut it back, trim it, so that just those middle plants are growing. And then I'll bring it inside, even it up a little bit, and put it on a sunny window. This likes some humidity, so I may put it on a saucer with a lot of pebbles in it. And that way I can keep some water on the pebbles, and that will give a little extra humidity to the plant. And then these can just be composted, or if you want to grow more, you can use some of these as cuttings and see if you can get the ends to grow. Probably it would be the very end of the plant that you'd use for a cutting on this one. So getting the house plants ready for winter, it's a good idea to do in September. And then when that first frost does come, you're ready, and you have your houseplants already prepared and inside. And again, just any older stems I'll cut off here so that it's a nice, neat little plant. Hopefully it'll put on a lot of new growth in the next couple weeks. Again, since we've worked on it, we'll give it a nice drink. But I won't fertilize it for a while. Let it settle in, both of these, for at least a couple weeks before I add some fertilizer to the water. Now let's head towards the backyard. A few more plants in this area. This is an area that gets part sun. I have sun gardens that get full sun and I have gardens that get pretty much full shade. This one's one that's kind of in the middle, and this hydrangea growing here does pretty well. The blooms were white, now they've turned to the lovely shade of lime green, and they also have hardened up a bit. You can kind of feel, they almost feel a little leathery instead of the very light, blowsy way they felt when they were white. And at this point we can cut these and bring them into dry. And they will last for quite a long time as a dried flower. You can also put them in a little water and then just let the water evaporate. But I just kind of like to dry them and put them in a basket, so I just cut them off. They will stay on the plant all winter, but they usually fall off at some point once they've turned brown. They'll turn brown after this, but if you cut them right now, they will stay this green color for quite a long time before turning brown. This is a caladium, one of the caladiums we planted earlier in the season, and that, once the frost has blackened the leaves, I will dig that one up and store the bulbs. Probably about next month, or perhaps later next month. It depends when the leaves are blackened. It is a tropical plant and grows extremely well in places like Florida, where it is a perennial. But up here we have to take it in for the winter. It's a bulb under the soil that we'll take up. Also, we do that with dahlias and begonias. This is a fuchsia with the orange blossoms, and that was grown from cuttings last year. I'll probably take some more cuttings of that one, and I have a couple others in pots here and there. And it too is a tender plant, and I need to take cuttings of it or dig it and take it in. Because it's so tall and lanky, I will probably just take cuttings of that one before I take it inside. Of course, the ferns, the hosta, and everything else in here is perennial and will just stay here for the winter. Any hostas that bloomed in here, I've already taken the blooms off of. And as the hostas continue to bloom, I have hostas that bloom from about July all the way through September. And once the bloom stalk has finished, I cut them off because I don't like the looks of them. Now let me move over to this large pot. With the exception of the large center begonia, this plant, everything in here was grown from either cuttings I took last year, and that would be two types of plectranthus. And these actually root quite easily, and they keep in a sunny window or sunny area or under lights extremely well. And the begonias, and these begonias, again, are a bulb. They're a tuberous begonia. Actually, it's a tuber rather than a bulb. And they can be dug in the fall once they've blackened. The large center one I will attempt to pot up and bring inside for the winter and use it as a large house plant throughout the winter. If I don't have room for it, I can also let that one just die back and bring it out in the spring, and hopefully it will come back. Keep it in a cool room and then water it in the spring and have it regrow. Again, there's also some sedum in here that was grown. And the plectranthus right now, this one particular one, the lavender one, really comes into its own in the fall. And you can even use this in borders. And I might try that next year. I'm going to take a few more cuttings of that for this winter and winter it over. I've had this plant probably for 8 or 9 years and just keep taking cuttings and bringing them back out in the summer to bloom in the fall. Now let's go back by the fish pond and the garden shed. We're in the shade garden, and there's not a whole lot going on as far as blooms now that the hosta have finished their bloom cycle for the year. But I do have one that I put in, which is called a chelone, and it is also known as turtle head. That's its common name. And the chelone is spelled C-H-E-L-O-N-E, pronounced chelone. The common name derives from the fact that the blossom looks a little bit like a turtle's head. And this is a pink one, and back by the pond I have put in a white one. The first year this had one stalk with a bloom. The second year it had two, and each year it's been adding a couple. I'm hoping for a nice large clump. It might like a little more sun than it's getting, but it seems to be doing pretty well. in this location, and it does add a bit of color in an area that can use it at this time of year. It is a hardy perennial, and it is also a natural plant for this area. It is a native, so it's a nice one if you're planting native plants. It's a very nice one to have for fall bloom. Now I'm going to head back near the garden shed and pond. As you can see, the leaves are starting to fall. I have a little froggy friend here in the pond, and they've gotten quite friendly. They don't jump as much as they did in the spring. They know, I guess, now that I'm not going to hurt them. Again, we have a lot of leaves that are starting to fall in the pond, and I have the non-hardy plants, the elephant ear and the ginger, that are going to need to come out of the pond sometime soon so that I can put the net over it. And I put the net over it using what used to be a tripod for a sprinkler. And I found it works very well to hold the net up. The first few years I netted the pond, I just put the net right over the top. And I was discouraged because all the leaves that fell off the trees that are above us ended up in a big clump in the middle of the pond and went right down into the water. They did not blow off with the wind. So I decided that I needed to somehow support the net. Now I have a shelf in one end of the pond, so having this particular sprinkler holder, which the sprinkler died, but the holder was still good, will fit into the pond and stand up, and I may have to adjust the leg a little bit. But when I go to put the net over the top, and this is the net that I'll be putting on it, I'll put the net over the top and then use some of the rocks from around the edge to hold it down. That way the leaves can be blown off the net and don't go into the pond. I'll continue with the waterfall and with feeding the fish. I can throw the fish food right on through the net until the temperature drops well below 50 degrees at night. Once the leaves are all off the trees, I will remove the net for the winter and set up the pond for the winter time. But this helps a great deal with keeping the pond clean, and it really cuts down on cleaning in the spring if we can keep a lot of the leaves out of it. In the meantime, there's a big net, and I can come in and pull some out. Some get caught up in the skimmer, which I have to clean frequently in the fall, as I did in the spring, and sweep off the deck, and try to keep the majority of the leaves out of the pond. They only add organic matter in the bottom, which ruins the water quality and clarity. Again, we have another fuchsia, and this one looks like a good one to take some cuttings, and also the coleus in different colors, and those also make good cuttings to take in. I've still been saving seeds from the impatiens, and it's not forming as many seeds as it usually does, perhaps because it's been quite dry. This is one of the hydrangeas that I had already picked, and you can see it's dried to a nice color. These are other things that I've picked, either out in the field or flowers. These are the eryngium, and these were the alliums and the poppies. And these are things I can use in fall decorations and also in Christmas decorations. Some of them will probably get sprayed to a nice gold color or silver so that they can add a little glimmer to some Christmas decorations. The grasses will go into fall decorations. It will soon be time to clean out my garden shed and also the garage and take any of the items that are vulnerable to mice, which would be anything made of paper or cloth, ribbons and that sort of thing, need to be stowed into some sort of container that's mouse-proof, because I do have a mouse problem at times. I put the mouse magic in, but still they can get in. And also anything that might freeze. That would be my deer spray and any other garden sprays or things that would freeze in the winter need to be brought in out of the garage and out of the shed. until spring again. So that's a job that's coming up. Probably sometime this month or early next month. We can get that done and things will be ready for winter. I also store much of my patio furniture in there, so it's a kind of a puzzle to get everything in for the winter and still have a little room to do some work on Christmas greens and that sort of thing. Now it's time to go inside and do some cooking and do a few things for fall. Hot dogs, coleslaw, and potato salad. They're kind of classics that we've been having all summer, and now that it's fall, maybe time for a little change up. I'm going to do the same menu, but in a little different way. And I'm going to start with making a couple salads, and the first one is going to be a cabbage salad with red cabbage. And this is about 4 cups of red cabbage. And then I'm going to put in 2 cups of sliced apples. Again, we're getting a little fall tenor into this dish. A good handful of dried cranberries, another fall type item. And a handful of toasted chopped pecans. And those are the main ingredients of the salad. Now we need to make a dressing, and I'm going to put 3 tablespoons of olive oil in a pan. I want to add to that 2 cloves of minced garlic, and 2 teaspoons of caraway seeds. And these I've put in my mortar and pestle. And I'm going to just crush them a bit to bring out some more flavor. Seems like a lot of caraway seeds, but it'll all turn out fine. I'm going to add those in with the garlic, and we're going to cook that over kind of medium heat for a minute or 2. Just want to cook it until it's nice and warm. And we've cooked the garlic a little bit. We don't want to brown it, but we do want to make sure it cooks. You can see the garlic start to get a little translucent. Then to that I'm going to add 1/4 of a cup of cider vinegar. I'm checking my list here. And a tablespoon of honey. And we want that just to heat up a little bit and blend. And I'm going to pour that over the cabbage and apples and nuts and cranberries. And make sure it mixes in well with the cabbage. This can be served warm or cold or at room temperature, so you have a choice. This menu would also make a very interesting tailgate party, especially if you were taking a grill to grill the meat. Oh, losing cabbage here. If you have cilantro, you could add a little of that to it, but it really doesn't need it. It's a fall cabbage salad with some of the fall flavors. The next salad I'm going to make is a potato salad. And I'm going to use sweet potatoes for this one. And let's move that over. And I want to put in about a cup of green onions, and I didn't have quite a cup, so I added a little sweet onion to it. And a cup of very finely sliced celery, and this was celery from the garden. Oops, we have something leaking here. And I'm going to add also 4 slices of bacon, which has been cooked and crumbled. And for the dressing, we're going to use some prepared brown mustard. And I'll add that to a 1/4 cup of olive oil. Let's see if I can. 2 tablespoons of spicy brown mustard. Then I want to add a 1/4 cup of rice vinegar. One small hot pepper, minced, and I used the pepper from the garden, a little yellow hot pepper, and 2 small cloves of garlic, which have been minced. I want to add some pepper and salt to this one. And again, I can add more to taste later on if it becomes necessary. But I'll just add a little bit now and mix that well. The mustard in the mixture does help the oil and vinegar kind of emulsify. And I'll pour that over the salad and we'll mix it in. And you have potato salad, but a little different from the usual picnic potato salad. There's a lot of nice fall color. Now we need to work on a dessert, and I'm going to make some pumpkin cookies. So we'll move over here. Now I have my ingredients all set up. I'll start out with a 1/2 cup of butter. And a 1/2 cup of shortening. And to that I'm going to add a cup of sugar, white sugar. And a half cup brown sugar. And we'll mix that up a bit. Cream them together. I'll scrape that mixture down a little bit. And add 1 cup of pumpkin. And this is just regular canned pumpkin, or if you have pumpkins and have cooked them up and strained them, you can use your own pumpkin. I did not grow pumpkins, so I have to depend on the can type or purchased type. And 1 egg. And we'll mix that up. Then I want to add a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. Now, if you don't have pumpkin pie spice, you can make your own by mixing 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, 1 tablespoon of ginger, and 1/2 tablespoon each of nutmeg, cloves, and allspice. And that will give you a good pumpkin pie spice. This is a container. I mixed my own, but I used an old pumpkin pie spice jar, so I know what it is. If you mix your own and don't have an old jar, mark it so you know what you have in your cupboard. Otherwise, when you look at it, you will have no idea what it is next year. And 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract. I like to get things out when I bake and then put them away as I use them. That way I know I've put them in. I'm going to mix this up. Then we'll add 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder, and I've combined those in this little cup for convenience. And 3 3/4 cups flour. And I'll add that gradually so that we don't have a messy cloud of flour. Let's see, a little up here to again, scraping it down so that we get it thoroughly mixed. I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees and prepared a baking sheet with some parchment paper. If I didn't use parchment paper, I would grease it, but I kind of like the parchment paper. the bowl off and move the mixer back into its normal home position. And then we're going to take about heaping tablespoon-sized balls of the mixture and roll them in cinnamon sugar. And again, I don't buy cinnamon sugar. I make my own using about half a cup of sugar and a tablespoon of cinnamon. And I'll put those on the parchment paper baking sheet. This recipe will make over 3 dozen cookies this size. I need to rinse my hands before I go on. This type of cookie is known as a shaped cookie, and we need to do one more thing before we put them in the oven, and that is to flatten them slightly. And I use the bottom of a custard cup. A measuring cup would work, a glass would work, anything with a flat bottom. And just press them down slightly. I'm going to bake these for 8 to 10 minutes. I think we'll go with 9. And we'll have some fresh pumpkin cookies to go with our fall picnic. The next thing I want to do is cook some bratwurst to go with this picnic. Instead of hot dogs, I'm using bratwurst, which is fully cooked sausage, but a little more fall orientation, I think. And I'll heat up the griddle. I'm going to put some bratwurst on to cook, and I guess we better cut them apart. These are all natural, no preservatives, no nitrates. Actually, they're better for you than hot dogs, probably, so we're going to cook a few of those. And I just want to get them nice and brown. Turn them a few times. I like to use tongs to turn anything like this. Ideally, I would cook these on the grill outside. And certainly if you were doing a tailgate party, that's what you'd want to do. And they will take a little time on the griddle on the stove, but they will cook. They are fully cooked to begin with, so we just want to give them some nice brownness. It's time to turn my sausages over. They're starting to get a little brown. Again, ideally I would do these on the grill outside, especially if I was using them as a tailgate. Now we'll turn them and let them cook a little longer, and meanwhile I'll take my cookies out of the oven. I'm going to put them right here, and I'm going to add something to them. The original recipe called for caramel-filled kisses. Good luck, because the store doesn't have them, at least the ones that I went to. So I'm using just dark chocolate kisses on some, and because I thought the caramel with the pumpkin was a really nice idea for fall, I decided to use Rolos for the others, which are chocolates with caramel in the middle. So I'll do some of each, and while they're still warm, we'll just add either a Rolo or a kiss. And in the event that I eventually find the caramel kisses, I will buy some and make another batch, because I think they sound really good. I like the looks of the kiss, but I like the flavor of the Rolos. So either way, you can do it. And you could use the Hershey's sweet chocolate or lighter chocolate, but I'm kind of partial to dark chocolate. So that's what I've used on the cookies. And then you let them cool. You can remove them from the parchment, or let them cool right on the pan. And you have a nice little dessert to go with our tailgate menu here. In order to finish things off, I made some rye buns. A little different than our normal hot dog buns, but I'm going to put these in some rye buns. And then we can serve those with some of the brown mustard and a little relish. We have relish that I've made in the past that can be served with it. And move up our flower arrangement, a little view of fall flowers. Again, some of these need to be picked before the frost, so you might as well enjoy them inside while you can. I'm showing some of the things I've done with the tomatoes that I've harvested. I froze some pizza sauce, also made some pickled red tomatoes, which I'm going to look forward to trying on pizza, and some chili sauce, which is not for chili con carne with beans and everything. It's a condiment to be used with meats. It's more of a Midwest dish. I figured out when I got here, I am from the Midwest, and people did not know what the chili sauce was, but it's very common in the Midwest, and it's served with ground meat like hamburgers and meatloaf and meatballs. And it's kind of a spicy ketchup, kind of like a thick ketchup. I also did my dried tomatoes, and I roasted these in the oven, and they're not completely dry. I put olive oil on them and roasted them in the oven, and then put them in a plastic bag, and I store them in the freezer. The pizza sauce was also frozen because it has herbs and onions and peppers in it. You can't process it by using a boiling water bath. These can be processed in a boiling water bath because they both contain vinegar, and that is acid enough to counter the spices. Also, the chili sauce cooks for about 4 hours before you can it up. The pizza sauce, on the other hand, is a little fresher and would not be safe to put in the water bath canner, so I freeze it and just put it in the containers, and I froze enough for a pizza in each little container, and we'll be using that. So there is our selection for today from the kitchen, and we have a nice fall picnic with some of the usual things, but done in a little different way for fall. Thank you for joining me. I'm Liz Davey, and you've been watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV.